So looking at this whole idea of listening to children's voices. Now, a lot of the stuff I showed you earlier on was about children's voice. So youth council, youth parliament, engagement with young people. Just to give you another example, nobody is appointed to a position in Leeds Children's Services across the city without children and young people, where you're working with children and young people, without children and young people being involved in that appointment process in some way, shape or form. Now, it doesn't mean they have a defining voice ultimately, but what they have is a voice. So they were involved in my appointment, for example. You know, there's that particular stance. But it's the principle of, if you're working to provide services to children and young people and their families, then surely children, young people and their families should have a voice in terms of what happens and who's appointed and how they work and the values that they have, etc., etc. That's just one example. I think the other example is, if you follow that theme through, if you are working with children and young people, surely it makes sense to have conversations with them about what they think about the services, what they think about the solutions, what they think about what should happen in their lives. And you should try and catch what they think about what should happen in their lives and help that inform the plan or the intervention or the piece of work that you're actively engaged in. So again, another factor across Leeds, there shouldn't be any interaction or any engagement with children and young people without their voice being sought and us responding to their voice. So their voice has a level of influence. By the same token, in the policy world, or in the shape of how child-friendly Leeds has developed, having more and more, and still growing, more and more opportunities for children and young people themselves to tell us what a child-friendly city should be like. And that's part and parcel of the initiative as well. And I suppose what I'd say is there was lots of that happening before we started, but lots of stuff we didn't really know about because it didn't connect in to the bigger vision of Leeds as a child-friendly city. It was just stuff that was happening. And the feedback we got from children and young people very, very clearly, two big things they said to us. The first was they were absolutely adamant fun had to be in one of the 5 outcomes. They wanted to enjoy their childhood. And what they were very clear about was we weren't actually that bad, which was, we weren't that bad at voice, at asking them. In fact, they were quite sick of being asked quite a few times. Two problems with that. One, we were asking the usual suspects all the time. So we were asking the same children and young people all the time. And if you look at it from our perspective, it was easier to do that. Rather than making sure we were getting to all voices of children and young people across the city as best we could. And the second thing was, when we had asked them, we didn't do anything with it. So they had no sense. And even if we went back to say this can't happen and why this can't happen, they're not daft, and they would say quite clear, we understand that, we just want to be part of the conversation. So they're involved in our budget processes, they're involved in all the decisions around that, and they understand that they might not get what people are asked for, or the priorities might not be the same, but they want to understand how those decisions are reached. And if you think about where we've been going in the UK in terms of the political process and engagement of young people in politics, and if you just look at the low turnout in terms of general elections, local elections, etc., there's an added incentive to a city like Leeds to engage children, the next generation, in the politics of the running of a city as soon as possible. So things like the Children's Mayor, the Youth Parliament, the Youth Council, etc., have been massively influential. The takeover days, deputations to full council where young people are putting their manifestos or their particular points forward. Absolutely a huge part. And a lot of it was already going on, but it didn't have a home. It didn't have there wasn't a cycle of influence that went with it. So the child-friendly Leeds and the commitment to the voice and influence of children and young people has just changed a whole raft of practices, from individual practice, individual casework, right through to the bigger conversations around the Children's Mayor, around Youth Parliament, etc. So I'd ask you to think about that with this. But I want to take this opportunity to show you another film now, and it's slightly longer than the others, so I'm not going to say much more. But this is this whole idea of restorative practices, because the embracing a restorative approach, high support, high challenge, doing things with people, not to them, for them, or nothing at all, everybody having a voice, everybody being listened to, has been hugely influential across the city in terms of children's voice and children and young people's voice, particularly in the education settings, where it started to change the environment within certain schools across the city in a much more positive way, inclusive way, because it's fundamentally changed the behaviour of the adults within those school settings as well as the children and young people. And this film, I love this film because this school was brave enough to take one of the what-if challenges and do something with it. And it was a good school already, and it had a fantastic coaching model that it was working with schools, but it took this idea of what if and what do you mean by a restorative approach. And in one of my previous jobs, when I was Director of Children's Services in Hull, we set up the Hull Centre for Restorative Practice, and we had half an idea of Hull becoming the world's first restorative city, and we did quite a lot of work around that, and that helped us think about the move to a child-friendly city in Leeds. But using some of that experience, Simon Flowers, the principal at Carr Manor, is on the film, but I just want to show you this film then, to give you a little bit more detail on restorative approaches, but how a restorative approach can help support hearing children's voices. Okay? And there's a wonderful quote at the end from a fantastic young woman called Temi, which is worth listening to as well. Let me see if I press the right button.
I think restorative practice is all about a way of moving forward from a situation, a way of resolving a problem that you would normally resolve.
We've been working a lot on relationships between members of the school community for many years now, and working out different mechanisms by which we can get to know each other well and we can support each other in our work.
When the person at this end gets the communication, you pick up that sponge ball.
If you're going to introduce restorative practices into a school, then you also need to be working with everybody in the school, including the kids. Otherwise it's like playing a game where only one person has all the rules. What we need to do is give young people the same messages as we give them to the staff and we give them to other agencies.
It's important that the students pick up the RP principles as soon as they come into Carr Manor. So as soon as they're in Year 7, you know that they learn how to facilitate or work out, resolve issues with each other that they've had with each other. We've obviously trained up Year 7 reps as well to be involved so that they can work with their peers and come together to resolve issues that have come up between them and other peers. And they often understand it a lot better than members of staff would.
Restorative practice is about resolving situations, and if situations are more easily resolved, then there's less of an issue with behaviour.
It helps a lot with minor conflicts with pupils. Had a couple that I did actually in a class, did a circle, and then afterwards took a couple of pupils who were having problems with each other out of the class, and we used RP to get them to have a better relationship and actually build a relationship in the first place.
I'd like to just take a seat, both of you, please. Thank you very much indeed.
In a friendship group, you kind of feel like you don't want to say something to upset the person.
All three of us are here to discuss an incident which has happened earlier on this morning in the classroom.
With restorative practice, you kind of let your feelings out and the other person let their feelings out, and you kind of listen to both sides of the story and you kind of see where your friend is coming from, because I think without restorative practice, a lot of feelings do get left inside and feel like, oh, because he or she's my friend, I can't let my feelings out to them, they might get mad at me or whatever. It's a way of being in a calm environment and talking to the person who's affected and the way you're feeling and expressing your emotions to the person, so they can understand your point of view and you can understand their point of view, and it's just a way of bringing harmony to everyone and just getting on together as one.
Okay. Restorative practices has given us an explicit language under which we can work and some methods by which we can do that work effectively and consistently across the school.
As a parent, it's had a really good effect. My two daughters go here at Carr Manor. I was also really interested in restorative practice, and I was actually invited in to see a session in school. I think it's just a great tool that can be used with parents, carers, and with young people themselves. And just that ability to say, let's have a look at this card, let's have a look at these questions, is a very powerful thing, rather than where do we start now. Hopefully it'll be used around the dinner table as it is in a school situation, and I think that's one of the powers of restorative practice.
The question sort of makes you reflect on your behaviour and how you've affected other people, not just yourself but everyone that was involved, even though you might think you didn't do like a big harm to the person, but listening to their side of the story can sort of make you think, would I like it if someone did that to me, and make you think twice of whether you want to do that again next time.
One particular incident where we used it was to deal with the issue of bullying in the class. Everyone had a chance to have their say, and everyone had a chance to really express how people's comments, how other people in the class were making them feel. And since then, the pupils have really been different towards each other. They've really actually understood and recognised what the comments that they were making, and we're now at a more harmonious stage in the lessons where they think before they say.
Some people I heard before may think it's an easy option, but actually it's a really good way for people to challenge and support without being confrontational.
Sometimes the student gets misunderstood by the way he reacts or they react to the situation.
If people don't get their say, then usually people will then get upset and they then decide that it's not worth trying to resolve issues, and that's never the right way to go about it.
If we don't sit down and speak, we'll just be going in a circle really. We'll be outside school fighting the next day, we'll be shouting at each one, it'll keep on going around, the words will get spread.
If you only listen to the person that's being affected, it's like you don't know why they got affected or why the other person did it.
You often get when a teacher and a student disagree, it always seems that it's always the student's fault.
If they talk about it like in a civil way rather than just like the teacher saying, I'm the teacher, so what I say goes, and you're going out of the class. If like they're willing to listen, people who might behave badly might be more, they might like comply more and like just kind of not be as bad if the teachers are more willing to work with them.
I think it makes it a lot more cohesive climate, and it makes it actually a less stressful place to work.
Because I work with a lot of the transition classes, we use it quite a lot during lessons. Sometimes it's to start a lesson just to make sure everybody's calm. Sometimes it's to finish a lesson off and to use it in terms of a plenary, making sure that everybody's understand the learning. There are certain classes that it's worked very effectively with, because what it's done, it's allowed them to understand the importance of listening to people and not actually interrupting other people whilst they're having a conversation. So being able to use a talking piece, to take turns, to go around in a sequential circle, and to wait until it's their time. It allows them to think before they speak, so you get clearer answers a lot of the time, and it's really nice to see the children all focusing and giving people a quality audience and listening very carefully to what other people have to say, to then come back to be able to respond to it.
The way that staff have responded to training is really positively so far. I've developed some nice relationships with staff around this and other schools where we've done training, and some really good feedback about how they're putting bits of it into practice through coaching, teaching and learning, and many other aspects of school life.
We have something at Carr Manor High School called coaching, and in our coaching session the other children actually used it to talk the child who was struggling in English, to support him and give him ideas as to how to improve his behaviour. And lo and behold, the next day he acted upon their advice, which was to turn up on time, not to say anything, and to get on with his work. And he stayed for the whole lesson and did not need to be removed, and was very successful.
We use circle times a lot in coaching because, like, say when two groups join together, you might not really know people as that well in that other coaching group, and it helps you communicate, think, giving you a lot of ideas.
We're beginning to see the impact both in relationships between people but also in the performance in the classroom. So what we're expecting to see is restorative practice coming across the whole school community in the way that people work together and in the way that we raise standards and expectations. And we can see that coming already, and we've seen that over a number of years, but I think we can accelerate that.
When they leave high school, it's going to be a skill that they're going to take with them to their workplace or wherever they go to. So if you come into a situation that you don't know how to resolve it, they might think, I did it in high school, let me try this on this person, let's see how it works out. So it will be a very harmonized city, and everyone will just get on a lot better than they do now. And yeah, it'll just be a really, really nice city to be in.
So do you get that? It would just be a great city to live in. Everyone would just get on, and it'd be really nice. So fundamental issue about relationships. So if you take what I showed you earlier on about the some of the structural solutions to children's voice, youth council, youth parliament, children's mayor, all the different groups and networks that have emerged across the city, and then take what's here in terms of a restorative approach and think about that commitment to working restoratively being spread across all professionals within the city, but across all children and young people, all those interactions that we have, and you think about how many you'd have across the city the size of Leeds, you can see that starts to help with that culture change that we were talking about. And if you picked up, the fundamental issue in there was the power of relationships, which we've talked about earlier on, and also that bit about listening. Everybody having a voice and everybody being listened to. So it's not just children's voice in terms of, oi, I want this and I want to have my say. It's people, professionals, genuinely seeking that voice out and listening and responding to that voice and how that influences what's going on. It frames the way relationships take place. So and it's as much about people in all parts of the organisation and across the city behaving differently. So in our leadership team, for example, the wider leadership team, every Monday morning we will have a circle. There's a number of rooms that are in our office block without tables, where it's just circles and chairs, where some of these key issues can be discussed, as opposed to having to have a formally agendaed meeting. So you'd have a go-round, we'd have a start of the week go-round, we have an end of the week go-round, and you run meetings in a slightly different way as well. If we expect staff to behave in a different way, listening to the voice and influence of children and young people, we should be modelling that in terms of the behaviour that we use across the organisation and with each other and with staff as well. But the trick with it is to find out where children's voice is being used and how you start to collate that information and then act on it. Because remember what I said at the beginning, we probably all can understand how you might get good at voice, but it's the influence bit that makes the significant difference. And whether that's at an individual casework level or whether that's at a strategic level about certain things that might go into play, whether it's around a school, around a community, around a cluster or whatever. So this exercise now, how long have they got?
Half an hour.
Okay, exercise now is to think about children's voice, think about the stuff that's currently out there now, think about how it gets used or not used, and then we need your brains on your best ideas as we did before. Use the restorative approach again. Everybody has a voice, everybody's listened to. Somebody take responsibility to scribe. Go.
Who's got a fabulous idea, who'd like to speak on behalf of the previous group to share an idea that you came up with? This is when I'll name people in the room. If no one, I'm looking at you, Lee. But I'll look at some of the women as well too. I'll look at Mandy sitting there. Yes, terrific. Thank you. Thanks, Tiffany. Yeah.
I'd just like us to consider about the work that's already been happening in this particular area and the role of children's voice in a lot of the activities. There's quite a bit of research, South Australian research, and 3 projects that have just moved on this year. We're becoming founding partners through UNICEF. So there's things happening in this area where let's look at what we've got and use that as a solid foundation for taking it forward.
Yeah, thank you for that. We always want to build on what there is and acknowledge the work that's already been done out in the sector. So fabulous. Any other ideas? Yes, terrific. Thanks, Heather.
So for getting children's voices heard, is we making it policy or legislation that things need to be run past kids to get that point of view of children, get their view on how it's going to look for them?
Yep. Okay. Others? Other ideas? Mandy, am I going to drop you in?
I was on that table.
Yeah, I know, but you're on that table now. So.
It was a good idea. We had some.
Am I coming your way quickly?
Refresh my memory. One of them was about extending the youth parliament concept to local government.
Okay.
And looking at how we might do that across local councils. I'm not sure if I heard that right, but we're using technology basically, so looking at development of an app, for example, that kind of has a Your Say flavour, but pitched at youth. Using the education structures that exist, like student voice, youth leadership groups, and also outside of school in using, I suppose, capturing the areas of interest that kids are into, basically, whether that's at the skate park or whether it's the sporting clubs, and using mentors from those areas to actually access, collect the information. There are a few.
Thank you for that. Anyone on this side of the table, just this side of the room, one last input of ideas? I swear I look at people's faces and read your name tags. All right, okay, well, over to you then, Nigel, thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, and thanks for the, is that working? Can you hear me? Is that on? Yeah, okay, good. Right, thanks for that, thanks for the feedback. Just a couple of observations on those ideas. I mean, the point that was made about the good stuff that's going on now, absolutely. Yeah, what we're not suggesting in any way, shape or form is stop doing what you're doing, that's the good stuff. It's find the good stuff, spread the good stuff. Is an absolute imperative, and there will be great examples, and I think the challenge is how many people in the room know about all the good stuff that's going on, and how do you spread that across such a large geographical area, but across partnerships as well. So go and find the good stuff. There's a whole raft of questions here. There's a significant number of asking for practical examples, what, etc., etc. And how do you make these things happen? So a couple of things. The first one is an explicit commitment strategically to the importance of voice and influence of children and young people. So it's in the plan, it's there, it's a thing that exists. Financially, we took a decision in responding to that. If this was important, we had to have some sort of capacity to help push our thinking and our boundaries, both with children and young people, but have a capacity to lead on that engagement across the partnership. So we have a very small but perfectly formed team run by an amazing woman called Hannah, and I'm quite happy to put through Junction Australia or Together South Australia, put you in touch with Hannah and the team. They are just a goldmine of ideas and initiatives and different ways of communicating with children and young people, and have been absolutely fantastic. So, but it does take, you do have to have a capacity. It doesn't just happen. Now you increase that capacity by individual members of staff who are, or teams who are engaged with children and families, then taking on board some of the training and some of the skills that they're given, or some of the training and skills that they've already got, and it just becoming an expectation that the voice and influence of children and young people and families themselves will be part and parcel of just how we do business around here. And it's part of that doing things with, not to, for, or doing nothing at all. Okay, there's a wonderful question here, which how do you challenge systems like HR to do things differently and encourage children's voice in the process? So I can't not answer that one. And the trick is, it's everybody's business. It's everybody's business. So if you came to Leeds in terms of child-friendly Leeds, the people who run the HR, the people who run the finance, the people who do the data, the people who do the admin, are as much part of the Child-Friendly Leeds team as anybody else. So the conversations that we have, the discussions we have about how much did we do, how well did we do it, is anybody any better off, they're in those conversations. And I'll give you an example of why that becomes important, and this happened recently. We've had a massive push in Leeds on increasing family-based solutions, so the importance of family, centrality of family, kinship care, and we had one set of data, and it leads into the next workshop really, but one set of data that was telling us the use of kinship care was going up and up and up, and we were dead pleased about that. But then the complaints officer, who was in the conversation because she's part of the team, said, well, that's great, but we've had a load of complaints from kinship carers about late payments and money that they're due not arriving on time, which led to a conversation with the finance guys who were saying, oh yeah, we've got a problem with that on the IT system, because we're pretty good at paying foster carers, but we've not been that good at paying kinship carers previously, which led into a conversation with the IT guys to say what we're going to do about that. Well, there is a solution, we're going to fix that. Now, we wouldn't have got round to that if they weren't part of the same conversation, looking at what's the difference that we made and what's their contribution to it. We had a Heath Robinson computer system in Leeds when I arrived, which was just a nightmare. And we took a decision to get rid of it and put the new system in. And when the IT team came in to install the new system, instead of them just coming in and putting the kit in, they spent a considerable amount of time with us understanding what people did. What we did, how we did it, and why we were doing it. And in the end, if you talk to any of the IT professionals who installed the new hardware and the software, they don't talk about we installed a new IT program and we installed the new software. They talk about we installed some stuff that helps people safeguard and promote the welfare of children, because they were part of that journey. HR have been exactly the same. Traditional processes, lots of great conversations about how difficult it is to recruit, how difficult all the processes you have to go through. And they've embraced, to be fair to them, they've totally embraced the restorative approach. And so I'll give you those issues around complaints, around grievances, around all the quicksand that exists in HR land. They've adopted a much more restorative approach to that, as early in the life of the problem as possible, as many problems resolved through conversations, those sort of conversations the kids were talking about at Carr Manor School, and completely started to rewrite the HR policy rule book, if you like, to respond differently to that. And the feedback from them has been really positive as well. But I take the point that that's made there. I think there's another set of examples about where do you get the information on, how do you ensure children's engagement is not tokenistic. That's your commitment at the start. That's why it's the two words together, voice and influence. And the accountability part of that is the influence. How can you demonstrate that there has been an influence? Otherwise, you're doing what everybody's doing, which is we get good at voice, we get good at asking, we get good at answering questions. The point that was made earlier on about different ways of accessing information, I think is really powerful. I think there was a comment somewhere about social media and thinking differently. If my kids are anything to go by, their world is works at 1,000,000 miles an hour. In terms of social networking, different ways, the apps that people talked about. We did some work with care leavers. So young people looked after by the state, reached the age where they move on. When we started in Leeds, we didn't even know how many care leavers we had, let alone know where they were or how well they were or how they were doing. We got on top of that, invested quite a lot of resource in terms of that. And we did a piece of work that we were really pleased about in terms of engaging with them and thinking about what they wanted. And we were all geared up to, better accommodation, more opportunities for jobs, etc., etc. The biggest thing that came back from that consultation with care leavers was they were lonely. They were lonely. Loneliness was the big issue. They were fine with the sort of accommodation, with the connections, where they were, but relationships, their connectivity with others, loneliness, which led us into, it's not the perfect solution to that, but one of the ideas they came up with was their own app. And their own app that connected them with other care leavers, and they could start to keep some sense of belonging and community and identity together. So those new innovations, I think, is critical as well. There was something in here about what about the voice and influence of 0 to 3s or even pre-birth. That's a challenge, but an interesting area. And we've had our very first Child Friendly Leeds Baby Week just before I came out here. From an initiative we stumbled across, I think it was in South America, I can't remember exactly where, but it's one of the world's first concepts around Baby Week, where you're bringing a whole set of families and health professionals and other professionals together to think differently about how we engage with kids in the very, very early years. And that was a great week across the city. And then because of Child Friendly Leeds initiative, you can mobilise a whole set of resources to work with you and support you on those sort of events as well. And I think that's more or less it. A lot of questions about how do we. And it's not a cop-out, but I would push you. And there is one more I'm going to come back to. I would push you to just think about the kids you're working with, think about the young people you're working with, think about the families you're working with, and start there. Start there, your personal commitment to listen more, to engage more, and start to create stories and share the stories when those things work. There was another question about the home game. How do you get brave about playing the home game with families and children? I think that you can do that individually as a professional, but it's quite a lonely place to be. But it might be what you want to do, because it might be what you've been trained to do. It might be, it's your intuitively, it's the way that you want to work. If you want to do it at scale, it's a strategic intent. It is part of a policy push and a decision, an explicit decision that we want to work in a different way. So when we took the decision to move from probably the world's smallest family group conferencing service, which was a woman called Bernie and two others. And what happened with that, just quickly tell you this, what happened with that service was if people remembered it existed, they might refer a family to that service. Oh, you might like to go towards that service. But it was a subjective moral judgment that I'm going to refer your family because I think it will work for you, but I'm not going to refer your family because it'll never work for you. Now, that's not our decision. If we believe in the centrality of families as the most important utility of the 21st century, access to that way of working should become part of your entitlement, because that's how you access the untapped resource of family, and that's how we want to behave. So you don't want to run one way of working with this group of families and another way of working with a different group of families. We're not quite there yet, but we're getting very close to it becoming a systemic approach, the way we do things around here. But it takes a conscious decision that that's how we're going to work. On individual practice level, what social workers are saying to us is, this is why I came into social work in the first place. This is how I want to work, but the whole system is geared towards me not working in that way. Okay? So there is a bit of a two-way thing going on there.